guess what? You won't be the speaker next time because we won't vote for you.
Well, that would be the
We'll move our
grown-up
votes
thing
over
to
to
do.
someone
But
else.
let me ask you something though. If we're having a serious discussion, why put all this BS culture war stuff about critical the issue? And how come Dan Patrick erased this bill for Mexican American African American studies and didn't bring that back on this new session? So I'm glad I'm glad Democrats are exposing that Republicans are only doing their own issues for this special session. Where's Mexican American studies during all this?
Hey, wait a second, everybody. Wait a second. I want to do something first. Gary, you still with us?
I'm here.
Okay, we got to talk about it. There's an affidavit out. What's the affidavit saying, and how will it impact potentially Gonzalez in his bid to lead ICE?
Well, the affidavit, which I've shared with you, Greg, it was filed in a federal lawsuit. I'm not sure what the underlying lawsuit is, but it's an affidavit taken by the Houston Community College Police of the sheriff's wife. And that and
His
there's some
current
questions.
wife or his first wife? His current
No,
wife?
I don't know. I mean, it says his wife, and she has said that he is engaged in spousal physical abuse. Now, at the time she gave the affidavit, the chancellor, who she's rumored to be having an affair with of HCC, was also in the room, which is mentioned by the police officer. So this has probably thrown a curveball into his confirmation. And obviously, you're innocent until proven guilty, but if you're involved in physical abuse of your spouse, probably disqualifies you from any job in Washington in the era we live in, and rightly so.
Well, let me go ahead and give you a few updated. Basically, what we have heard as we report or gather facts on this is that there was allegedly a relationship between HCC Chancellor Maldonado and Miss Gonzalez back in 2016.
Right.
And so it's a 4 or 5 year old deal. Gonzalez and his wife have reconciled. Obviously, she no longer works at HCC. We were wondering whether this issue was going to be clawed in. We didn't have the affidavit. It becomes news if it becomes a factor in the confirmation process. And
I'm sure it's going to come up.
Yeah.
I'm sure it comes up.
And I guess the question becomes, did he disclose to the FBI or whoever was doing the background check? Bill, your thoughts there? Anything? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen the affidavit. What I heard the story is that, you know, the wife and the chancellor were shacked up, I think at the Hyatt, and Ed basically caught him and went into the room and I think sort of slapped everybody around a little bit. You know, and so I don't know whether if that's the only time it occurred and under those sort of extreme circumstances, I'm not sure how much, you know, effect it ends up having at the end of the day. I think you could make a great question though, did he disclose it or not? Because that's one thing the FBI gets really irritated about, is you not disclosing anything that might be a problem.
Yeah, and to be fair, we don't know that at this point.
Right. And, you know, like, let's look, this is all coming out probably in Ben Hall's lawsuit against HCC. It's there's allegations that a staff member there was sexually harassed, sexually abused by a member of the board, and that Maldonado allowed it to happen. I mean, let's also look at the fact that if this affidavit was taken by HCC police and involved Maldonado, who is essentially their boss, that kind of stinks too. I mean, thoughts there? I mean, why is he using his own police department instead of HPD? Or for that matter, the sheriff's department?
Because you control them.
Right. That's an easy question. I'd like to go back to the Gonzalez nomination for a minute, if I could. I don't think if this is true, I don't know that it's even going to become a factor in this. The Democrats have already decided that they're going to derail this issue based on the fact that Gonzalez has said that he will not end the relationships between county sheriffs and ICE in terms of cooperation agreements. And the fact is that in Houston, he did the same thing. He ended the 287G program, which he promised to do, but he didn't change one single policy. The ICE agents that were in the jail before
He became sheriff, stayed in the jail. The ICE agents that were taking people who committed crimes that were in the country illegally were still being removed and deported from the country. And so the Democrats don't like the fact that he's actually conducting law enforcement and acting like a law enforcement officer. They don't want the laws enforced in this country. And so his nomination is going to be derailed because of that. And that's unfortunate, because I think of all the people that Joe Biden could have picked, he was actually a pretty good pick.
I like Ed Gonzalez. I think if you give him, you
I do.
review what he has done, he had an untenable situation with the jail, and I thought managed that remarkably. You know,
I served with him on city council, and he's a great guy to work with. I just think, knowing these things, once they put this on hold, it's really hard to get it going back again, because it puts this shadow of doubt over it. No matter what you come back and say, it's just an opening for people to say, well, should he really be there?
And he can't be named as acting director either.
He is, Ed Gonzalez, as a really great guy and a really good guy, and he's been a good sheriff.
Well, if he doesn't go, we don't have to worry about the sheriff. He gets to be the next sheriff.
Well, there you go. That whole mess that's going on over that'll take
be
that
over.
out. Yeah.
hey, Bob, let's talk about the border. And Tony, I'm sure you'll be interested in this as well. What are the ramifications of sending the National Guard down there? How much help can they be, Bob? Is it more symbolic? We've got contingents from other states who've sent public safety officers down. What's your take on that?
Well, let's be clear. The National Guard has been at the border since the Perry administration, so there's nothing new there. They're very effective in what they do. They provide additional eyes and ears, surveillance, monitoring, that type of thing. And the National Guard can actually enforce state laws. And that's what the governor is asking to do. It's not just the National Guard that's being sent down there. We sent 1,000 troopers down there. Florida and Nebraska have sent state troopers down there. Other states have sent National Guard resources. The governor has organized a call with other state governors around the country to send in resources, and not just people. They're sending aircraft, they're sending boats, they're sending vehicles, and all of that. You see Florida Highway Patrol cars down on the Texas border. So, and why? Because it impacts every city and every community in the United States. These people carrying their COVID with them are going to go into every community across the country. And more importantly, the drugs, the fentanyl that are coming across in massively record numbers are definitely impacting every community. Florida Governor DeSantis learned when he was here, his people were telling him that people that were crossing in the Del Rio sector, more than 70% of them were headed to Florida. So it makes sense that the governor of Florida is going to send resources here to help secure the border. The governor's done a good job on this. The federal administration turned over all of the policies that were working that reduced the crossings of migrants in the border by 95% under the Trump administration. In one day, Joe Biden reversed all of those policies, and it's been Katie bar the door at the southern border ever since.
Tony, I want to give you a chance to talk here, but frankly, please don't wave the bloody flag of racism. That's not what this is about. Go ahead. You got the floor.
Sure. Well, how about this? Again, a lot of these tactics are apprentice show reruns. The difference is that, one, Donald Trump was wildly popular because he had that TV show. Secondly, Donald Trump implemented some draconian tactics on family separations, literally separating the families. The Biden administration had to come in and try and bring those families together as the first day of the administration. The other thing I'm going to add, at the end of the day, this whole conflagration about sending the state, basically our state resources in the form of our soldiers to the border. When Trump did that, it was clear it was not working. Why? They're not trained. It's interesting that Republicans who will extol the Border Patrol Union will undermine the work that they do. It's kind of like saying, well, hey, teachers don't do a lot of work. Let's send in guards to do their job. They still have to be trained to be Border Patrol agents. And if you're basically with the National Guard, you haven't received that training. And on top of it, there's legal ramifications about what they can or cannot do. Are they extra eyes? I guess so, like any eyes would do. So to me, all this looks like grandstanding because none of it is really addressing the real issues. Because I'll make this easy, Greg. I'll make this easy. At the end of the day, after the Border Patrol Hunger Games, the immigrants that survive the Hunger Games, they're being hired at construction working sites, which all you got to do is drive around Houston where you hear the hammers, follow the hammers, you see where the workers are being let in. Why? Under the table, without insurance, and we need them.
Okay, Bob, take 1 minute, and I want to go to Bill because Bill's got an interesting perspective, and of course, Gary and Sue. Go ahead, Bob.
Well, first off, the National Border Patrol Council is ecstatic that Governor Abbott and Governor Ducey are providing them with assistance because they are frankly being overwhelmed by having to do babysitting duty because of the changes in policies of the Biden administration. The separation of families is still occurring in this country because the Biden policies are forcing families to put their children in the hands of dangerous drug cartels and ship them across the desert, dump them in the desert out there overnight with nobody around, no food, no water, throw them over border walls, toss them into the river to distract Border Patrol agents. All of that is being done because of the changes in policies in this administration, not to mention the continued rapes of women and children, sexual abuse, and all of these things that Biden is not only allowing, he's actually encouraging all of these things to happen through his policy. The Biden administration has become the last mile delivery system for the human smuggling cartels that are making billions of dollars off of his policies and exploiting his issues. And sorry, Tony, I'm sorry you can't address any facts on this issue. You talk about political talking points, but you can't address the facts of the issue. The facts of the issue is these people are being treated cruelly, inhumanely, and it is disastrous. In Brooks County, 80 miles from the border, there have been over 60 people that have died of dehydration in the desert there because of the massive numbers of border crossings. You're seeing it in every county along the state. Migrant rescues, last year we set a record of rescuing migrants at more than 4,500 people that were rescued. We've already hit 9,000 rescues that Border Patrol agents have had to do this year because of the cruelty that this policies are taking place with. And it's intentional on the Biden administration. They did it on purpose. In the meantime, Kamala's going to China, but she won't go to where the problems really are on the border.
Okay, my facts don't fit your agenda, so you don't believe.
And wait a minute. So Democrat County
you
Judge,
get a second, he gets a second
Cortez,
rant.
Democrat County Judge Cortez, I guess, is racially profiling.
Like he gets to
hold on. Let's maintain order. We've got other panelists here. I don't mind telling people that Bill's coming to us from Maine because no one can rip off his condo. They're never going to get there. Gary has recently been in Vermont, and Sue has recently been in California, I think. Yeah. I mean, as y'all, and I know you guys, you have conversations with the people in these states. Bill, have you talked to people in Maine about what's going on down here in Texas? Anything you can allow, or you just with
No, up here, in Maine, the politics in Maine are very, very interesting. It's an extremely independent state. They split their electoral college. They've got ranked choice voting. I mean, it's the kind of place I kind of like to move to, actually. But on this border issue, I think it's quite interesting. In that Chris Perkins poll that came out a couple of months ago, the border ranked barely second to the grid among Texas voters is the most important issue. And it was very bipartisan. It was quite interesting to me that, a lot of Democrats think that the border is a real problem. And I think that is mostly what you're seeing is people down in the valley having to deal with these issues, which is predominantly Democratic, although it's got a pretty significant Republican minority down there, are seeing real time what these problems are creating. Look, but the problem, guys, is that the immigration system is broken. There is no question that we need workers in this country. There's no question that they're getting here through these back channel routes. There's no question that they're being taken advantage of on the way here. They're being taken advantage of after they get here. And all of that is because we have a broken immigration system. if it were not for immigration, the native population of the United States would actually be declining right now, which would have very severe economic consequences for the country. We've got to have a reasonable amount of immigration. There needs to be a process to bring people in. It can't all be Indian doctors and computer programmers, because you need a bunch of young people to do these service worker jobs. And we've got to get that figured out. I don't think it's that hard to figure it out, but both political parties make political points by Republicans. I mean, we're going to be tough and just do enforcement, which you can't fix it by just enforcement. Or the Democratic Party, oh, we got a big heart and we're going to, we feel sympathetic to all these people. Well, you can't take in everybody in the world. There's got to be a rational middle ground to this. And the other thing is, I don't think we're ever going to solve this problem until we do something about the dysfunction in Central America. That's my 2 cents.
Look, yesterday I moved a refrigerator 7 football fields on a dolly outdoors. I'm going like, what if I had to do 25 more of these? I would die. Hard labor. Colin, you were in Vermont, weren't you?
Actually, I was in Maine too.
You were in Maine too. All right.
Yes.
So like, what can you allow on this topic? I mean, you've heard Bob, you've heard Tony. You've heard Bill.
Oh, I think, well, first of all, Tony's concern about the Canadian border is misplaced, because when I was in Maine a couple of weeks ago, the Canadian border was closed and has been closed for quite a long time. There's not all these people trying to rush in through Canada because, you got to get through the Arctic, and that makes it a little more difficult. So we do have a problem. It's not just Hispanic now, Tony. It's from all over the world, because Joe Biden has basically said America's borders are open. So come on in. The problem with that is we don't get to pick who comes to America. They get to pick. And that's the problem with the system. The other problem is, if you go back in our other immigration waves in this country and history, which are all important, when people came in from Europe, they had to have a sponsor. They had to assure the government they're not going to go on the dole and be subsidized by the American people. And so that was the basis of coming in. You also had to be healthy. They did a health inspection on Ellis Island. If you had illnesses, and they had a list of them, you got sent back to Europe. You didn't get to stay. Now, with open borders, we got nothing. So we're bringing back diseases we thought were never there. And I don't blame these people. It's part of where they come from, but it's a fact. And so, number one, we need to control the border. Number two, we need to figure out who's here we want to keep. It's not 10 million illegals in the country now. My guess it's over 30 million. And we need to take a look at that. And if they're not, certainly if they're criminals, we don't want them here. They need to be deported. But you go into other areas too, because we need to pick who the immigrants should be. Should we have a more liberalized legal immigration system? Absolutely. Should we have a work program for people who don't want to come here permanently, would like to get a job so they can send money home to mama and the kids wherever they are, as long as they qualify under the rules? Absolutely. Let them come. There are jobs. And Bill's right that we are in decline. The average age in America continues to go up. It's also, by the way, true in Europe. It's also true in China, not in India, but that is a factor. So we're going to need people, but we need to have a system. And the problem is the Democratic agenda is to get people in that are dependent, so they'll vote for them. And the Republican agenda, it's a mixed bag. So big business wants illegals so they can exploit them, Tony. That's why they want them here, and we can keep wages down for everybody else, which I don't support. I think it's a bad idea. So we've been talking about this. I mean, I remember, this goes back 20 years ago when I was Republican Party chairman. It was that long ago. I talked about it. We talked about immigration reform. Bob remembers, because his wife was one of the leaders who worked with me, Lana. And we talked about it, we encouraged it, and nothing's happened. Nothing's happened for 20 years. And you know what? Nothing's happening now either. It's not going to happen. It's like, it's because part of the problem is everyone has a political agenda, and Bill on this is spot on, and nobody's talking about how do we deal with these serious challenges for America going forward. It's not talked about. It's all about political points.
All right, Sue, you heard this conversation. I mean, look, clearly, I think I speak for all of you. We'd like to see some common sense immigration reform, but the political dynamics in Washington are not going to allow the two parties to come together on that. I mean,
that's why we need a third party.
Yeah, so that's why we need to quit blaming, I think, Washington for everything, and in Texas take charge of our own problems, then you have two problems that actually could solve each other. A border problem, people coming across, and a work shortage problem of which we need workers. Actually, these two can complement each other and solve problems by at the border, and I don't know why. The governor could do this if he wanted to. The governor could set up a program by which people could come here and have visas to work in Texas, and then work with the industries that need workers and employees.
How can the governor do that?
Into those industries to work here, and they have a right to be here because they have a work visa to be here. That would
Texas
solve
can't do
two
that.
problems.
Texas
Instead
can't
of
do
saying,
that.
well, Biden says this, okay, so what? Oh, but we're for states' rights. Well, right. Oh, okay. The problem doesn't get solved by sending the National Guard to the border. It doesn't solve the problem. And I don't understand why we can't put together a bipartisan group that sits down and says, what are we going to do at the border to move people through to go to work? And where are we going to bring employers in that want these workers and what industries? And, yeah, if there's somebody here that can sponsor you to come in, then let's bring your sponsors forward. But those conversations aren't taking place at all. So who should be the leader on that? Should it be the governor? I mean, who should be?
You know what I mean?
They can't even get through.
Let me address something Sue said. Under what authority could the governor of the state of Texas issue immigration visas to guest workers? The immigration law is the federal government's total sole only responsibility. The states have no authority whatsoever in issuing visas. So how can you say that Governor Abbott would have the authority to do that?
Well, if
Can you
Sewer
ask,
hired us
let me
to-
ask you a question though. Listen, can you ask for a waiver on that? Could he ask for a waiver in his state to bring people in to go to work because we need? Because I can tell you, coming back from California, they're having a big problem because they grow. They don't have people to pick the crops.
Look,
They have
the
people to go in the
House
industries
No,
passed,
there's no doubt that that needs to be done, but that has to be done by the federal government. The state cannot issue immigration visas. The state cannot engage in immigration law. And that's not what Governor Abbott is doing along the border.
But he couldn't go and say, look, this isn't nationally, but for my state, can we have a waiver and we have a system and we have something set in place by
Bob,
which we'll have
no.
people come through?
The federal government's not going to allow that.
to
How do
Sue's
you know
point-
if you don't ask?
To Sue's point, we're using our intelligence and genius to create the barriers versus create the solution. So I think you make a.
I think
make
you
a
just
good-
ask. If they say no, then you say, well, damn, I mean, then you think of something else, some other way. But I am
They
not
won't even
convinced there
accept an
isn't a way that
invitation to
this
come to
can't
the
be worked
border and
out.
meet with the governor. They won't even talk to the governor on the phone
That's political.
about this issue.
That's political grandstanding.
look, we talked about this 2 years ago. It was called the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, bipartisan support, passed the House. Both sides came together and said, look, there's about 2 million, or at least 1 million essential farm workers who are illegal. Everybody agrees they should be here and have a path to citizenship. It never became law, even though there was bipartisan support in the House. It is
Republicans in the Senate.
dysfunctional what's going on in Washington on this issue.
And it was the
and-
Republicans in the Senate that killed that bill, by the way.
And-
What's that?
It was the Republicans in the Senate that killed that bill.
Right. And so, I mean, we're not seeing any solutions on the reform side in our from our leaders in Congress, and it's all about leverage and positioning, and not looking for solutions because they might have to share the credit. I don't know.
You know what,
Well,
Greg?
the
though?
fact is most of these,
It's an easy hot
most
button
migrant workers don't
issue.
want citizenship.
Hey,
They want
hey,
to be able to come here and work and send money back to their homes and their families in whatever country they've come here from. They don't want citizenship, but because of the fact that we've halfway secured the border, I wouldn't even say it's halfway anymore, but At some point, we'd halfway secured the border. It made it too difficult to go back and forth. We need to have a legal guest worker program. Absolutely, we do. But it needs to not have all these other political things that allowed gang members to come into the country, that allowed criminals to come back into the country, that allowed sex offenders to come back into the country. That's why Republicans stood up against this bill, because they tie all this other nonsense into it. Malarkey, to use the word that we've bannered around here a few
I love
times.
malarkey.
Yeah, and so give us a clean bill that says, here's a guest worker program. Let's get that done. And I bet you it'll pass on both sides.
Hey,
So
Greg,
why
Greg,
don't we put
Greg,
why
if I
don't
could
we
bring
put
something
together
up.
a guest workers program that suits our state and take that and then try and push it.
Because it's against the law. I know you
through.
don't like the Constitution,
hold
but
on.
it is against the
If
law.
I can say something.
I
one
do
thing-
like the
one thing
Constitution.
to,
That I was a chief.
Hold on. We're about at the bottom of the hour. I want to go to something we used to do called What Did We Miss? And you guys, if you've got a burning desire, you can talk about it. I'm going to start with Bill King. Do you have something we missed?
I'll tell you what was been underreported is that Greg Abbott accepted a $1 million campaign contribution from the chairman of Energy Transfer, who made $2.4 billion off of the freeze after Abbott's PUC chairman got on a conference call and told all those guys that don't worry, the governor's got your back. We won't claw back the profits. And it is absolutely exhibit number one for why we need campaign finance reform in Texas.
Sue?
I just think the repeated conversation here over and over again about this voter suppression is here locally. There is voter suppression from a mayor that won't allow citizens petitions to go through. The vindictiveness of trying to fire and not pay a head of a union that was reinstated and will get full back pay. But let's clean up our own house before we start talking about statewide and national stuff. And let's hold the feet to the fire here in our own city. Control what you can control.
Tony?
I'm going to give you bad news, good news. Bad news, of course, we should keep talking about the court's ruling on DACA, which has complicated the lives of a lot of Houstonians. You can keep track with Fiel Houston. They're doing a lot of grassroots work to let the community informed of what's going on. I would also recommend folks who can to check in with their immigration lawyer. Here's the good news. There was an announcement, of course, depending on the COVID-19 shutdown or not. November 6th, Houston will be hosting a Day of the Dead parade, which brings more culture to the streets of Houston. The caveat, of course, let's see if there won't be a shutdown.
Okay, Gary Pollan, what's going on? What are we missing?
Well, what we're missing is the realization by the Democrats on Commissioners Court, Hidalgo, Garcia, and the one I don't like to talk about, that we have a crime problem in Harris County, and it's out of control. And even the Houston Chronicle has woken up from their stupor and has recognized we have a problem. These are the same people that were advocating the felony jailbreak that is now Russell v. Texas, that was stopped, by the way, by the Republicans who intervened in the case. So our crime rates are exploding. Fox, to its credit this week, has done a whole story, a series of stories on these bail situations where people are getting 5 bails, felony bails, 7 felony bails. And lo and behold, they're going out and committing new crimes. So things are out of control. They've probably woken up. Their answer to the problem is sticking a finger in the dike while the floodwaters are going over the top of the dam. So, and the commissioner's idea is, again, these Democrats, they don't want to do what needs to be done, which is significantly expand the DA's office, not cut constable patrols, but increase constable patrols. There's things we need to do. What is happening in our county, you can tell what's coming from what's going on in the rest of the country, Portland, Seattle, and other places where they decriminalize crime. You know, in Dallas now, if you steal $900 or less, the DA won't take charges. So guess what's happened in Dallas? An explosion of thefts under $900. And that's the mentality we're fighting. And the bottom line is that is not going to change until we get these yo-yo Democratic politicians, and not all of them, Tony, a number of them are really good, but I'm talking about Hidalgo and company off their positions and out so we can get control of runaway crime in this county. I believe this is going to be the #1 issue in the 2022 election. And people, regardless of party, have had it. They have had enough. And they're going to send packing those that are responsible.
All right, Bobo, you get the last word, and then I
Okay,
have the
so
last word.
I want to congratulate Judge Hainan, federal Judge Hainan, who ended the DACA program. It was created illegally and unconstitutionally by the Biden-Obama administration, Obama-Biden administration. And so he stopped that program. But Tony, those people's lives that have been given DACA are not under limbo. Judge Hainan, in his order, exempted them from the order. It only stops new people from coming in and being registered under this illegal program. To Gary's point about the lawlessness and this $900 theft exemption that they created in Dallas, this is going on in Democrat-controlled cities all across the country. You look at San Francisco, where they're going in with shopping carts and just wandering around, loading up their carts in TJ Maxx stores and other stores around there, where they can pile $899 worth of stuff into a basket and just casually walk out the door because employees have been told not to get in the way because you can't prosecute it. Lawlessness that is creating violent crime in San Francisco, in Portland, in Seattle, in Chicago, in New York City, in Houston, in Austin, in Dallas, in Baltimore. All of these cities have one thing in common: Democrat leadership. It's time for Republicans to get off their butt on local governance and start bringing out some candidates that can restore the rule of law in these cities.
All right. Hey, everybody. For only the third time in the long history of What's Your Point, I will not be here next Sunday. My colleague, Lena DeFlores, is going to sit in. I respect her intellect. I respect her acumen. I respect her professionalism. And I know she's going to do a great job. Facebook audience, I hope you'll check in. I may not get my seat back. She may be so good at it.
All right. See you guys later.
To show you how serious she takes this, she came in on her day off to be
Wow.
with us and see how things are going. She's top notch.
How did she grade us?
I don't know. We'll do a debrief after this. Bill Keene, thanks for interrupting your vacation. Tony Diaz, thank you for the late pickup. We're not going to talk about which. We had one of our panelists who got tied up and couldn't come in. Tony was going to be in next week. He probably won't be in next week, but he filled in. He pinch hit well against stout opposition, I might add.
Later, guys.
All right,
Yeah,
have
thanks
a
for
great
being here,
weekend,
Tony.
everybody.
Take care. Have a good week.